All right, well, hello everybody, and welcome to today's practical webinar from Church Fuel. I am so glad that you're here today. I'm so glad that you have carved out time to watch this because we're going to talk today about three real things that will really help your church grow. And not just grow, but also grow in a healthy way, because there are a lot of things that grow and get bigger that are not healthy, but we want to grow and be healthy. And so I'm so glad that you've taken the time out of your busy day to come to this, particularly because I know that there's not a shortage of information out there. I mean, it's not like on the internet or all in the world or all in the relationships or the bookstore, or all the different places you can go to get help. It's not like there's no information on these topics. So I'm so encouraged that you would come today and participate this, because there's no shortage of information and there's really no shortage of opportunity. And so there's so many different things that you can do, so many different tactics or strategies or blogs or websites or books or conferences that you can attend or people that you can call on the phone. And so our hope and my prayer for today is that today would be really, really practical. Now, I've got a little bit of bad news for you. If you have come and stumbled across this video because you are looking for a quick fix, this is not going to help you. And so go ahead and find something else to do, because this is really not going to help you, because I don't believe there are quick fixes. For a long time, I did think there were quick fixes. I tried a lot of quick fixes, and I found what you will find if you believe there are quick fixes, that they really don't work, that they look good, that they are like those made-for-TV products. They work great in the commercials, but in real life, they break. And so there's no silver bullet. There's no simple 40-day thing that you can do to just fix all the stuff that's broken in your church. This is a process. This is a hard thing. And, it's not like if you just pray harder, if you just work harder, if you just preach harder, your church will grow. I know a ton of people who pray a lot. I know a ton of people who are fantastic preachers. I know a ton of people who have done 40 days of, fill in the blank. And things in their church did not change or turn around. So we're not talking tactics. We're not talking little tactics that you can implement in your church. So I'm not going to, tell you, hey, if you just start another service time, or we're not going to talk about if 80% of the chairs are full. We're not going to talk about going multi-site. I'm not going to convince you that the next greatest ministry idea is the next big thing that you need to do. Those are not fundamental things. Those are tactics. There's nothing wrong with those things. There is a lot of truth in those things, but those are tactics, and they're not really going to help ultimately. So I'm going to talk about some fundamental things. So they're real things. I mean, they're baseline, foundational, just massive, massive things that I think will really help your church grow. Now, I know you're wondering a little bit about who I am. My name is Michael, and I am the founder and the CEO of Church Fuel. I've been a pastor. I've been a church consultant, and that's a little bit about me. This is the most common question I get is, how do you pronounce your last name? And so there it is phonetically for you. It's Michael Lukaszewski. Lukaszewski. I tell people, zoo like where the animals are. Or my kids. And so that's how you pronounce my last name, in case you wanted to say it to somebody else. There's a picture of me and my beautiful family. I am such a blessed person to have a great family. It's my wife, Jenny. We've been married for about 15 years at the time I'm recording this. My oldest daughter, Lauren, is right above me. She just turned 13 this last year. Emma is our middle child, and she's middle child, pastor's kid, middle child, pastor's kid. I think that's 0 for 2. But she is awesome, and she loves animals and stuffed animals and real animals, but she's allergic to cats, and so she's pretty depressed about that and hopes she grows out of it. And then Matthew is our youngest and our only boy in our family. Even our dog is a girl, so me and Matthew are holding down the fort for the guys in the house. He loves sports, basketball, football. We love watching the Falcons, baseball, you name it. If it's on, he knows it and watches it. We watch SportsCenter together. And so there's a little bit of my family ministry background related. And there's my Twitter name. If you want to say hey to me on Twitter, I'd love to know you're watching this. So you can just send me a tweet and just say, hey, watching the video. And if you've got any questions, that's a great place to get me. But ministry background, after about 10 years or so as being a youth pastor, student pastor in a few different churches, my family and I moved to Atlanta to start a brand new church in a town outside of Atlanta, about 45 minutes from the airport in Atlanta, maybe 55 minutes, or 2 hours if it's traffic. And we started a brand new church, a portable church, and met in a movie theater called Oakleaf Church. And when we moved to town, we didn't know anybody. We literally knew 0 people and had about $10,000 in the bank and figured that would last us for a few months. And so we did that in 2005. In 2006, the church started. and it grew really, really, really fast. We met in a movie theater, and it was the only movie theater in town. So a lot of times people ask, hey, what was the reason that the church grew so fast? Was it the great preaching? Was it, what was it? And honestly, I think a big piece of it, obviously God bless, but a big piece of it is we were kind of the only modern church in town, and we met in the only movie theater in town. And so Andy Stanley says, if you're the only hot dog stand, your hot dogs don't even have to be that good. And so I think God did an amazing thing, but it was also a unique time and a unique place. And so we grew really fast. We started in 2006 with just a core group. We knew 0 people, built a core group of about 25 people, and that was it. And when we launched, we had 280 people show up at our first service. And within a year, we're pushing 700, 800, pushing 1,000 after a couple years, and eventually moved from that movie theater to a high school auditorium, and then eventually renovated kind of a warehouse-y space. And God did some amazing things, and so we were blessed and really are blessed, and the church is still doing really well. After that, I worked for a company called The Rocket Company, and maybe you have heard of The Rocket Company. They are worth knowing about, therocketcompany.com. And so I started working with Casey and the Rocket Company team, actually before it was even called The Rocket Company, and it was just Giving Rocket, and we were helping churches raise operational revenue or just increase giving, raise money, not a building campaign, but just regular money to do ministry. And then we launched Preaching Rocket and Volunteer Rocket. And I eventually went from kind of just being a content provider to running the team and running the whole business. And while doing that, we were blessed there. God bless that. And it grew from, kind of a small consulting company to making the Inc. 5000 list at number 602, which was a cool thing to get to go to Washington, D.C. and get a little thing that says, congratulations, you're on the Inc. 5000 of the fastest growing companies in America. So that was cool. Did that for about 3 years, and now am working with and started a company called Church Fuel, and that's designed to just resource the church, to provide insanely practical resources for the church. And so our mission at Church Fuel is to provide insanely practical resources to move your church forward. And listen, I love theory, I love debate, I love talking philosophy, I love talking ministry models and all that different kind of stuff when it comes to the church. But at the end of the day, we want to help you figure out how to do whatever it is that you want to do. And so that's why we use the phrase insanely practical. And so whether it's our resources on our website, we have and will have more just single things you can get and use, and some of them will be free and some of them will cost a small amount of money, but that you can get and just get quick and immediate help. We're going to have different courses, and so if you check back from time to time, we're going to release courses on specific topics in the church of how to create a church unchurched people love to attend, or how to start small groups for the very first time, or how your church can use email marketing to grow. I mean, very specific topics for courses that just last, a few weeks up to a few months, and that'll just be real helpful and real practical. And then we're going to have coaching and consulting. And so consulting might be coming to your church on a weekend and evaluating everything, and then meeting with your leadership team about some specific suggestions or improvements. Or it might be sitting down with some volunteers or your staff or your leaders to come up with a strategy or clarify a mission or vision or something in your church. And so those are some kind of hands-on products. We want to always be connected hands-on with the church. And so that's some of the stuff we're going to do with Church Fuel. But today on this video, we're going to talk about 3 things, and I'm saying real things that'll help your church grow. 3 real things that are going to help your church grow. And I want to get right to it. I want to just get right to the content and talk about these things. And the number one thing that I believe will help your church grow is not another service. It's not another campus. It's not doing a 40 days thing. It's not a building campaign. It's not raising more money. The number one thing that I believe, and I've seen it over and over and over again to help your church grow, will be this: to get better at leadership. Leadership. Now listen, I know that doesn't even sound great. You're like, I can't believe I'm watching this video and the guy's talking about leadership. I know it, I get it, but listen, leadership, I'm going to talk very practically about this, about how to do this, but leadership is the number one thing that will help your church grow, because there was an author by the name of Leo, I should say that wrong, I have a problem, I can't say Leo Tolstoy said this. He said, everybody thinks of changing humanity, but nobody thinks of changing himself. And so when we talk about leadership, the first kind of leadership that we've got to talk about is leading yourself. And here's why leadership is such a big deal. Because this is the number one thing that affects church growth and church health. Because when leadership gets better, It's like the tide. When the tide goes up, all the boats in the harbor go up. Why? Because the tide influences all the boats in the harbor. So leadership is like the tide in your church. When the culture of leadership is raised, when the culture of leadership goes higher, all the programs, all the ministries, all the staff, all the services, everything in your church gets better. When leadership gets better, everything gets better, and the ripples go really, really, really far. So when we talk about leadership, we've got to talk about leading yourself. And everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change themselves. And so we've got to be the kind of leaders that are worth following. And one of the best ways to do that is to model what we expect. Now listen, I've got this wrong. I've got this wrong in the past. And I still get this wrong from time to time. We often do this. We often expect what we don't model. We often expect what we don't model. So we go to our team, we go to our volunteers, we go to our leaders, we go to our staff, we got all these different people, and we expect from them of something that we don't even do ourselves. And we expect what we don't model. What happens when we do that is we become bad leaders that have these expectations, but we don't model the very thing that we're expecting. So we expect our staff to give, but we're not giving. We expect our people to serve, but we're not serving. We expect our people to drop their job and come to a training meeting on Tuesday night, but we're bugging out early because we got to get home. And so we often expect what we don't model. And so what happens when we do this is it becomes the blame game. And the blame game is really deadly. You've heard this. If you've ever watched kind of corporate people that run sports franchises, different groups of leaders, you see these kind of leaders. I have a friend who calls these abdicating leaders. And he says abdicating leaders, they don't say I made a mistake. They say mistakes were made, right? It's passive. I didn't make a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong, but some mistakes were made. Listen, mistakes can't get made. You can make a mistake. I can make a mistake. And a great leader, when that's leading themselves before they try to lead anybody else, when we make mistakes, and we will, we don't say mistakes were made or that was wrong or something happened there. We say, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I did this wrong. And so we've got to lead ourselves. And if we're going to lead ourselves well, here's what we've got to do. And I want to try to be real practical for you on this. I want to give you an action item for how to lead yourself. And the action item is this, is to create a personal leadership development plan. And here's why I'm talking about this. Because I believe that goals are overrated. Now, you can tweet that if you want. Goals are overrated. M. Lukazuski said it, right? We're such a goal culture, right? Set goals, set resolutions, goals. What are your goals? What are your 3-year goals? What are your 5-year goals? What are your 1-year goals? Listen, any knucklehead can set goals. I don't believe it's a great win to set some goals. Now, goals are good. We should have goals. But plans trump goals every day. Plans trump goals every day. And if you want to be a great leader, you don't need a goal to be a great leader. You need a plan to be a great leader. Now, I'm not talking about your team or your organization or your church or your ministry or anything yet. I'm talking about yourself. What is your plan to be a better leader? Now, here's how you do this. It's really simple. You get out a sheet of paper or you open up a new document and you say, personal leadership plan, and you write your name. And here's what you do. You decide how you're going to become a better leader over the course of the next year. You say, you write a section and you say, books I'm going to read. Listen, I love this day and age that we live in, that you can go to the bookstore, you can go to Amazon. I love Amazon Prime. I get a box from Amazon Prime just about every day to my house. There's so many books that you can read on leadership, and there are some good books on leadership. And I think it's bad stewardship to say I'm going to be a good leader and not read books on leadership, because there are people that that lead multi-billion-dollar corporations. There are people that lead churches. There are people that lead ministries, not just in the United States but worldwide, that have figured out some stuff that you and I don't know, and they write them in the books. And so don't just say I'm going to read books this year. That's a goal. Make a plan. Say I'm going to read these 4 books, and here's what I would encourage you to do: order them. Set them on your desk. As I'm recording this, about 6 feet away from me is a bookshelf, and there are about 22 books on the top of the shelf that I'm going to read this year. And when I create a reading plan, I got to say, these are the books I'm going to read. I'll probably read some other stuff too, some stuff I don't know about, but these are the books I've decided in advance. These are the books I'm going to read, and I buy them all, and I set them there, and I have them right there, and as I read them, I move them off the shelf. And that's my reading shelf. Why do I do that? Because I will forget. I will not do it. Other stuff will happen. And I don't need a goal to read. I need a plan to read. And so I order the books and I sit them right there and I read 2 a month. And that's what I'm going to do. I may do more, but I will not do less. And so what books are you going to read? That can go on your leadership development plan. What about this? What conferences are you going to attend? There's some great conferences. You don't need a goal to attend a conference and become a better leader. Go ahead and make the plan. Buy the ticket. Buy the plane ticket. Buy the hotel room. Decide who you're taking with you and get 2 of them. And go ahead and put it on your plan and say, leadership development plan for your name. Here's the books I'm going to read. Here's the conference I'm going to attend. I mean, they're not going to invent the conference between now and 3 months from now. It's already on the books. It's already on the calendar. There are people that spend thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars putting on leadership conferences. Go to them. Invest a few dollars and go to one of those conferences and pick one. Put it on your calendar. What about podcasts you're going to listen to? Go ahead and decide which ones you're going to listen to and write it on your development plan. Is there a coaching network you're going to be in? Is there a resource you're going to buy? You see what I'm getting at? Don't just say, I want to be a better leader. Get a sheet of paper out and say, this is what I'm going to do. Here are the dates. Here are the titles of the books. Here is the date of the conference. Here's who's going to the conference with me. And just decide for the next 12 months. If 12 months is too advanced, 6 months, 3 months. This is what I'm doing to become a better leader, because plans trump goals every day. So your action item is to create a personal leadership development plan. And I know that sounds advanced, but you can do it on a legal pad. You can do it on a dry erase board. Go away and pray and ask God, what do you want me to do? And then make a list and then do it. And you'll become a better leader. And that's leading yourself. Now, number 2, not just lead yourself, but lead your team. And so when we talk about leadership development in the church, some people get sideways. They're like, leadership development, that doesn't even sound spiritual. Jesus didn't do leadership development. Yes, he did. He just called it something different. And it's called something different in the church world. It's discipleship. See, I believe leadership development is really just discipleship. When you're leading your team, what you're doing is you're helping them follow Jesus. And so spiritual leadership in the church, leading your team, is really discipleship. And if you're doing leadership development right, it's like discipleship. And so it really does have a place in your church, because you need to help your people follow Jesus and become better and become the best version of themselves. I know that sounds touchy-feely, become the best version of yourself, but really that's just talking about helping them be good stewards with the influence God's given them. And if you've got people on your staff, whether they're full-time, part-time, or volunteer, they're there and they're involved in the church. They're involved in ministry. And it would behoove you, and it would behoove me, to help them realize their potential as leaders and to lead them really well. And so as the leader in your church, here's what I believe. If you're leading a church, if you're leading a staff, if you're leading a ministry, then you are really the chief clarity officer for your team. Your job is to clarify for the people that you lead. Say, Michael, what do you need to clarify? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to clarify the roles for everybody on your team. To clarify the roles for everybody on your team. You are the chief clarity officer, and your job is to clarify the roles. And here's why this is important. Because you have people on your team who they came on your team to do one thing. Let's say they came on your team to be the youth pastor. Okay? And it was real clear when you brought them on. It was real clear when they came on. They're like, I'm going to be the youth pastor. But over the last 6 months or 6 years or somewhere in between, what happens? We pick up all these different responsibilities. And your youth pastor is not just doing youth ministry anymore. They're doing this, they're doing that, she's doing this. All these different things are happening. They're worship leading, they're mission tripping, they're doing all these things. And what happens is they have drifted away from their clear role. And the reason they've drifted away is not because they're bad people, it's just because we drift by human nature. And we've got this mission that's so big and it's all important. Mission's important, worship's important, and all this kind of stuff. And what happens is the people on your team forget their core. And so your job as the leader is to refocus them, to be able to sit down and say, hey, Jimmy. I always talk to Jimmy. Like Jimmy is the fake guy that I've invented that becomes the object of all our illustrations. So if your name is Jimmy, I'm sorry. I'm not picking on you. Everybody's Jimmy, okay? So you've got to, as the leader, you've got to sit down and say, hey, Jimmy, I know you're doing all these different things, but I need you to know something. This is the number one thing. This is the most important thing. All these other things that you're doing, they're good things, they're not bad things, but they are not the most important thing. This is where I need you to win. This is the sandbox that I need you to build the sandcastle in. This is the area that you need to win. If you succeed in all these other things, but not in this thing, it will not be a win for us. This is where you help our church the most. This is where you make the most difference. And you've got to provide that kind of clarity for your team. So I believe everybody on your staff should have not a one-page job description, That's fine, but I'm a one-sentence job description. That everybody on your team should know exactly what they're supposed to do in one sentence. If you can't say your job on Twitter 140 characters or less, it's too dang complicated. So you've got to provide clarity for everybody on your team. This is what we need you to do. And you've got to fight to keep them clear. But the second thing is this, not just clarify roles, but clarify goals for everybody on your team. Chief Clarity Officer. You're leading yourself, that's awesome. But then when you go to lead your team, the thing you've got to do is you've got to clarify roles and goals, roles and goals, roles and goals. What's their role? What's their goal? And you've got to work with them to help set their goals. Now let me tell you why this is huge. Because accountability in church world, it gets all squirrely, it gets all sideways. Because we try to hold people accountable to do stuff, and many times we try to hold people accountable for something that we're not even clear on. And so accountability kind of gets weird in the church because it's a Jesus thing and it's a God thing, and aren't we just kind of supposed to be in this for ministry? And man, this sounds like work and ministry. How do they go together? But listen, here's how it can work. Let's take the youth pastor again, and the youth pastor is Jimmy, and we sit down with Jimmy, and you're Jimmy's boss, right? And you sit down with Jimmy and you go, hey, Jimmy, what do you want to see God do in your ministry this year? What do we want to see God do in the lives of students and their families this year? And you begin to think and dream and involve Jimmy in the goal process, right? It would be a mistake to go to Jimmy and say, hey, Jimmy, I was just up on Mount Sinai with God and Moses. And so God and Moses and I were hanging out, and I've written your goals down on these tablets, and here they are. Well, now that feels like work. That feels like you're his boss, and he's just there to do your bidding. But if you can sit down instead with Jimmy and say, where do we want to see God show up? What do we want to see God to do? And you can involve Jimmy in the process, then accountability feels totally different. Because now you're not holding him accountable to what you want him to do. You're holding him accountable to what you agreed and worked on together. And so accountability feels totally different if the person is involved in the goals. And so, I always think if you want somebody to follow rules and policies, involve them in creating the rules and policies. If you want to involve them if you want them to feel responsible for the mission and vision, then involve them in the process of the mission and vision, right? You just can't hand everybody everything and expect them to be as excited as you. They weren't involved in it. But if you can get them involved in it. So you've got to clarify roles, but you've got to clarify goals. And so here's what that looks like. It means that it's specific. If you've got somebody over the prayer team and that's their role, you're on the prayer team, do they have goals? I mean, because they should have goals. And so, it's like, how many people do we want to have involved in the prayer team? That's a goal. And so then you can sit down with that person and go, hey, how are we doing toward the goal? And accountability feels totally different when it's that way. And so really the thing, and this sounds harsh, but I've been on the wrong side of this. If your team is not focused and inspired, it's probably your fault. If my team is not focused and inspired, that's probably my fault. And so I've got to not just lead myself, but I've got to lead the team. And some practical ways to do that are to focus on their roles and focus on their goals. Now, I want to give you an action item because, again, we want to be practical. So I'm giving you a worksheet, and you can download this worksheet. It's free, and it's just the roles and goals worksheet. And where you can go for every person in your organization, for every person on your staff, for every person that's in key leadership, to fill in this worksheet and say, here's what your role is, and here are your goals. And here's what's cool about this. I believe when you get this filled in, you can share it with everybody. And you can say, hey, as the pastor, here's my role, here are my goals, I want everybody to know. As the youth pastor, here's Jimmy's roles, and here's Jimmy's goals. The bookkeeper, and we all know, right? We all know what we're all working on. And so accountability feels more like community and not just, boss telling us what to do. So there's an action item for you. Number 3 is not just lead yourself, not just lead your team, but number 3 is lead your volunteers. And so I want to encourage you here. I've worked with a lot of different churches. I'll have churches, they'll bring us in, they'll bring me in, or bring our team in to talk about volunteers. And I've seen this with small churches, medium-sized churches, large churches, city churches, or rural churches, denominational, non-denomination. Hey, one thing that the teeny tiny small church has in common with the mega church, it's not a lot, but there are some. One thing is that they all seem to need more volunteers. I mean, I've yet to have a pastor call me up and say, hey, Michael, we've got too many volunteers. Can you come down here and help us figure out what to do with them? No, we are the other problem. We need more volunteers. But I want to push on you. I want to encourage you a little bit. I know you need more volunteers. But how are you pastoring the volunteers you already have? Because I believe what Jesus said is true. In Luke chapter 16, verse 10, Jesus said this: if you're faithful in the little things, you'll be faithful in the large ones. But if you're dishonest with the little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. And this is a lesson that I talk to my kids about all the time, to our elementary age and middle school age kids. I talk to them all the time. I said responsibility and trust go together. If you want more trust, you got to be more responsible. And as you be more responsible, you'll get more trust. And as you do a good job with that trust and you're more responsible, you'll get more trust. And it never ends. And I think it's like that way with leading volunteers in church. And I've just got to wonder that maybe sometimes we struggle to get new volunteers because we're not doing a good job shepherding, leading, or pastoring the volunteers that we already have. And I just wonder if you said, hey, for this next season, this next few months, this next half a year, this next semester, this next season of ministry, that we're going to make volunteering in our church the healthiest and best and most awesome place to be. That volunteer burnout is going to be, it's just not even going to be a thing in our church, because once you become a volunteer in our church, you're going to be cared for and pastored and shepherded and led and prayed for and resourced and encouraged and inspired more than anybody else in our church. And we're going to take care of who God's already given us, because God's given you, maybe you have one volunteer. Well, God's given you one volunteer. How well are you stewarding that relationship? And so the number of people that you already have, the number of volunteers and leaders that you already have is more important than the new positions that you need to fill. So when it comes to leading those volunteers, how do you do this? Well, let me give you some practical stuff. We just talked about creating a leadership development plan. What if you helped each volunteer in your church do that? We already talked about clarifying roles and goals. What if you helped the volunteers in your church do that? What if you went to and sat down with the volunteer and said, hey, Jimmy's a volunteer too. Hey, Jimmy, you're volunteering here, and here. And I know we've asked you to do some stuff, and you know what? That's my fault. I shouldn't be asking you to do everything because you have such a great heart, and I know you're going to say yes. But I just want you to know this is the area that we need you most, and it's okay to not do all these other things. What if you help them limit their focus? What if you help get them in the right spot? What if you help lead them and keep things off their plate because they love Jesus and they love the church and they love you, so they're going to say yes because you're asking? But what if you said, hey, I love you too much to see you burned out, and so this is an area of great need in our church and you're great at it? What if you provided inspiration? What if you provided training? Listen, nobody wants to come to a training meeting, but everybody wants to come and hang out with other people who love Jesus and love the church and have a pep rally. And so what if you said, hey, in this next season, we're going to really focus on how we can provide care, how we can provide training, how we can communicate better to our volunteers, to lead them well. And I got to believe if you create a culture amongst your volunteers where it's not a pain, where it's not a hassle, where it's not a time-consuming, joy-killing thing in your church, that if you create that culture, I bet you're going to attract a lot of new volunteers. And so leadership is a huge area. If you can learn to lead yourself, and if you can lead your team, and you can lead your volunteers, I really believe that it'll help the church grow. Now, that's not a grow quick scheme, is it? That's not, hey, you can't implement all this by tomorrow. Now you can download that worksheet and get to work on this tomorrow. But this is going to take some time. If you do it, it will lead to growth and it will lead to health. And so leadership is a great thing. So we talked about getting volunteers in the right spot, helping them limit their focus, and provide inspiration and training. Let's keep going, and let me give you the second thing. Here's the second thing that I believe will really help your church grow this coming year, and that is this: to eliminate ineffective programs and ministries. To eliminate ineffective programs and ministries. Now, I'm going to make somebody mad in this section. And so I apologize in advance. I'm not trying to be antagonistic. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm not trying to be mean. But I do want you to be healthy. And I do want your church to grow. And I believe that there are a lot of churches that are being held back because they're holding on to ineffective programs and ministries. Will Mancini wrote a book called Church Unique. I think it's really worth reading. It's a fantastic book to help you discover your unique DNA. The first half of the book particularly is excellent. The whole thing is great, but the first few chapters are just fantastic. But Will says this. He said, most churches do too much. In the absence of clear discipleship outcomes, we feel successful only with more attendance at more church stuff. And I think Will is right on the money here. And what we've got to do is we've got to learn how to grow by being simpler. We've got to grow by subtraction. And I'm convinced that most churches are just too busy. Like Will said, he said, we're just too busy. And the metaphor, if you want a metaphor, is the treadmill. What's the treadmill? Well, constant motion, never getting anywhere. Lots of effort, lots of energy, lots of exertion, lots of sweat, lots of hard work. But then at the end of it all, you're right at the same place where you started. Lots of activity, but you're not getting anywhere. And as I look at a lot of churches, some of the churches we work with, I see a lot of activity. I see a lot of emotion or a lot of motion, but the church isn't getting anywhere. It's the same size. It's the same budget. It's the same number of volunteers, same number of small groups. It's just the same. I mean, it's not advancing. It's not getting more healthy. It's not getting any larger. Why? Because we're not looking at the things that we're doing and going, are they effective? And so the reality is we just get busy. Jim Collins says this: to do the most good requires saying no and the discipline to stop doing what does not fit. He said, if you want to grow, if you want to do the most good, right? Churches, we want to do the most good. If we want to do the most good in the world, we've got to say no, and we've got to stop doing what doesn't fit or what doesn't work anymore. And so when we get too busy, it's very dangerous. Let me give you some consequences of being too busy. When your church is too busy with ineffective programs, your volunteers are spread too thin. Your volunteers are just spread too thin. I've worked with churches that have needed volunteers, and they're like, Michael, we need to get some more volunteers here, 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 here. And as I look at the whole menu, the whole smorgasbord of places where people can serve, that church doesn't have a volunteer problem. They have a focus problem. They've got volunteers in all these different ministries. In fact, some of the best people are, in other places that don't work when they could be being deployed in this very effective ministry that you've got, but it's understaffed. I remember being a youth pastor and getting so frustrated because all the best Sunday school teachers that I needed were in the choir. And they couldn't be Sunday school teachers because they're in the choir. And I was like, hey, how do I get people out of the choir? And guess what? The guy leading the choir is thinking the same thing. It's like all the best people that can sing, they're all volunteering. And so we were competing with ourselves for people in our church, and they were spread too thin. So when you've got too many programs and ministries, your volunteers are all over the place. Here's another thing. Your own health is at risk. Now, I'm kind of moving from preaching to meddling at this point, but your own health is at risk when your church is too busy. Listen, I was there. I have been in this very thing where my spiritual health, my relational health, my emotional health, mental health, all the kinds of health, right? Physical health, all of it gets at risk when we are just doing too much. Psalm chapter 90, verse 12 is a psalm of Moses. Moses actually wrote this one. And Moses said this: teach us to number our days. Teach us to number our days. And so many times we read that first part of that thing, it's like number our days. It's not like we're supposed to have the death clock up of going, well, here's how many days I got left. That's not to be a depressing thing. Teach us to number our days. But we talk about that. It's like, well, you can't live forever. Can only live once. YOLO. That it's not meant to be depressing or a motto for recklessness. There's a second part to that verse. He says, teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. That's Psalm chapter 90, verse 12. That's what Moses wrote. He said, teach us to number our days so that we can gain a heart of wisdom. In other words, when we understand that we have limited time, it should lead us to know how to spend the time that we have. Not to sit around and go, oh, we've only got this many days left, but to know where to spend those days. It's not a negative thing. It's not a depressing thing. It's supposed to be a motivating thing so that we can do the things that matter. So let's be real, right? Let's be real. You've got ministries in your church that are marginally effective or don't work anymore, but they are literally killing you because you have to be at the church every night, because you're making somebody else be at the church every night, because you're thinking about it on the weekend, because you're not taking a day off, you're not honoring the Sabbath. Busyness is a form of idolatry. It's a form of idolatry where work and ministry has become an idol in our lives. And again, I'm saying this, I'm preaching hard at you right now because I've been there. One thing I've noticed about great leaders that I respect a lot, and there's a lot of them that I respect, but I've never seen a great pastor leader that I respect get on Twitter or social media and talk about how busy they are. I've never seen Andy Stanley, for example, get on Twitter and talk about how tired he is, or how many meetings he had to come from, or how worn out he is on Friday, or the holy hangover on Monday. Yeah, why? Because I think there's a healthy perspective there, and it's a heart of wisdom. It's a heart of wisdom. And so if you're too busy, you are putting your own health at risk. Number 3, you're going to settle for mediocrity in your church, because we're talking about eliminating ineffective programs and ministries. And so if you don't have the guts to get rid of a program that is no longer effective, is no longer working, maybe it used to work 10 years ago, but it doesn't work anymore, what you're going to have happen is you're going to have a menu of ministries that are mediocre. How's that for alliteration? You're going to have a menu of ministries that are mediocre. And nothing's going to be great. It's all going to be average. Nothing's going to work really well. It's all going to be average. Why? Because it's reality. You don't have the time for it. You don't have the budget for it. And so it's not good. And so when you eliminate ineffective programs and ministries, the goal there is not to eliminate it so that your life is easier. The goal is not to get rid of something so you don't have to go to the church building. The goal is not to get rid of it just so you can be lazy and watch more Netflix. The goal is to recapture and refocus and repurpose that energy into the things that work really, really, really well. I mentioned Andy Stanley earlier. I heard Andy talk about this at a conference. When people come and they see their environment on Sunday and they see their kids' ministry and they have storytellers and worship and amazing volunteers who serve in children's ministry who commit to 3 and 4 years at a time to serve in kids' ministry, and they have these amazing programs and ministries. And they say, Andy, how do you have such amazing kids' ministry? He says, you know what? It's really not that complicated. We just don't do anything else. We don't have a Christian school. We're not doing VBS. We don't have Sunday night service. We don't have Wednesday night service. Like, our kids' ministry is Sunday morning, and it all starts, and it doesn't just start there. It kind of starts and ends there, and it's the thing. And what he's realized is, hey, we can do 1 or 2 things really well, or we can do a bunch of stuff really average, and we'd rather do a couple of things really well. And so you settle for mediocrity. Here's another thing. Your communication is ineffective. You ever have this happen to you? You're getting on Sunday, maybe you're going to make announcements, and somebody at the last minute comes up and they're like, hey, pastor, don't forget to announce, the spaghetti supper, the spaghetti fundraiser. And you get up to make the announcements, and you welcome everybody, and hey, and you read them like 7 announcements. Or you open up the bulletin or the handout, and there's like 14 different things going on. And guess what? You know this. It's just hard to admit it. You know that when you have to communicate 7 things, you don't really communicate anything, because communication becomes effective the more of it that there is. And instead of taking 3 minutes and talking about 7 different programs and ministries, what if you took 3 minutes and talked about 1? So if you're too busy, you got to talk about all of them. And you feel the pressure to talk about all of them because you don't want to leave anybody out, or you don't want to, make anybody mad. And so you talk about all this stuff, but your communication becomes ineffective. The email newsletter that you send out, in the middle of the week, that's got like 37 ways to get connected at the church, it doesn't work. You know why it doesn't work? Because it's not about one thing. And you know that, but yet we don't want to, cancel something or get rid of something that's no longer working anymore. Here's number 5. This is probably the most damaging when we're too busy. Spiritual activity becomes the measurement for spiritual growth. Now, as a church leader, as a pastor, you know that spiritual activity and spiritual growth are 2 different things. You know that there's a lot of people that can be reading their Bible and be far from Jesus. Heck, Judas was with Jesus and was far from Jesus. And so spiritual activity is not the sole measurement for spiritual growth. But when we have so many programs and so many ministries, then we do what Will talked about earlier a few minutes ago when I said that spiritual activity becomes a measurement, and we only feel like we're accomplishing stuff if we get more attendance at more church stuff. And so we send in the reports and we send in the numbers, and here's the attendance, and here's what this was, and here's what that was, and we feel like this program's working because this many people were at it. But the reality is it's not true. Just because somebody's at something, it doesn't mean that it is effective at its purpose. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. You must ruthlessly evaluate your programs and ministries based on effectiveness. And the effectiveness is the highlighted word there, because we're not evaluating based on whether something's good or bad. All your programs and ministries are good. If good or bad is the measuring stick, you'll never cancel anything. But you've got to answer and evaluate everything based on their effectiveness. Now, how do you define effectiveness? It's effective at accomplishing your stated mission and vision. So if your mission, let's just say your mission is to reach the lost, okay? Well, if you've got a program in your church that hasn't resulted in any lost person coming to know Jesus, it is not effective. And I know that that's ruthless to say that. And I know that there was somebody that started that ministry 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago. And maybe it was effective at one point, but it's not now. And it doesn't need to be retooled. It doesn't need to be tweaked. It needs to be canceled. It needs to be eliminated, because there are other things that are more effective. And you need to take that energy and that money and those people and put them on your best opportunities, not babysitting your ineffective ministries. And so if your church is too busy, if you've got programs that are not working, if you will cut them, if you will eliminate them and take that energy and money and people and put it on the programs and ministries that are working, I believe your church will grow, and I believe your church will be more healthy. Now, Let me give you the third thing. The third thing is this. A real thing to help your church grow will create healthy systems. I mentioned Andy Stanley before, but at the Catalyst Conference a few years ago, he said this. He said, if you don't know why something's working when it's working, you won't know how to fix it when it breaks. But leaders are generally bad at evaluating things that work. Leaders tend to be good at evaluating problems. This is why church leaders tend to blame things that break on people rather than systems. You might not need a new youth pastor. You might need a new system. And this was in a talk that Andy was giving to where he said that it was actually systems that so many of the time, healthy systems actually lead to success a whole lot more than sermons. So he said, hey, there's a problem in the church and we think a sermon's going to solve it because I'm a preacher and I think a sermon will solve everything. But in reality, Andy's saying there's probably an underlying system that is broken. Now, this was true for us when we planted Oakleaf Church. I told you at the beginning, so we planted this church in 2006, and within a year it had grown like 800, not even pushing 1,000 people within a year. And we were like a year into this church plant, and all of a sudden, we had a mess. I mean, we had a mess of people coming. We were running 3 services. There was a period of time that we were running 4 services in 2 different movie theaters with staggered service times, and I would preach 4 sermons in a row, back to back to back to back, literally with 60 seconds in between. And I'd have a band finishing up in room A, and I'd walk in there and do the message, and while I'm doing the message, the band's starting in the other theater, and then I'll walk back over there, and it was rapid growth. I mean, as fast as we could do stuff, people were coming to it. And I looked around, and we looked around, I wasn't the only one. Our team looked around and said, man, we got a problem. At this point, I realized it wasn't that hard to get a crowd, but it was really hard to grow a church. And we had a whole bunch of people who liked the service. We had a whole bunch of people who liked the music. We had a whole bunch of people who liked church in a movie theater. We even had some people who liked the preaching. But we couldn't get people in small groups. We had a problem finding volunteers. We couldn't get people to volunteer with our kids ministry. I mean, it was a mess. Nothing was systematized. And we were basically solving the same problems over and over and over again. And I realized we didn't have a preaching problem. We didn't have a vision problem. Vision, check. Good preaching, check. Systems, fail, big fail. And so we realized that we had a systems problem and we had to figure out how to do systems. And so we realized we couldn't solve systems problem with vision because that's what I thought I could do. If I could just get up and cast a bigger vision, if you could see the end goal, then you could get through it. And that's what visionaries do. We get up and we cast a big vision and we think vision is going to solve all our problem. I have a friend named Les McCown. He wrote a book called Predictable Success. It's a business book, but it is worth reading if you are a pastor or church leader. Predictable Success. And he has this, he talks about the different kinds of people that every organization needs in order to grow. And he talks about the visionary. And he talks about the visionary that's like the hyper visionary, and a lot of pastors are hyper visionaries. And we come in there, and he calls us visionary arsonists, that we just throw so much vision at something that we'll just burn it to the ground. And that's what I was doing. I was just casting vision. We're here to reach the lost, lead people from where they are to where God wants them to be. Hey, it's not about babysitting Christians. Hey, we're here to reach them. And it was vision, 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 vision. And none of our systems problems got fixed. You know why? Because you can't solve systems problem with vision. Here's the other thing. You can't solve systems problems with preaching. And I actually heard Andy say this. And Andy, who I consider one of the best communicators and one of the best preachers there are, he said that systems work better than sermons. Now, as a pastor, that pains me to say, because I want to say, man, if we could just preach the Bible faithfully, if we could just preach the Bible passionately, accurately, whatever, then that's going to solve all the problems. But systems problems in your church can't be solved with preaching. And you can go back to the book of Acts and read this, that more preaching and better preaching isn't going to solve the systems problem in your church. And so what we'd be wise to do is to create some systems. Now, people ask me all the time, they're like, Michael, what is a system? Listen, here's the deal. A system is something you need anytime you do something on a regular basis. You need a system. A system is simply a process for doing something. It is the way things get done. It's not the thing, it's the way that the things get done. And so you need a system for things in your church that happen on a regular basis. And so for think about all the places you need systems in your church. Anything that happens on a repeatable, regular basis, you need a written, documented system. And when you do that, here's what I know. So here's some things I know about good systems. Number one, they don't naturally develop. In our young church, as it was growing, systems were going to not naturally develop. Now, I learned this in high school, right? I learned this from Isaac Newton, right? Newton's second law of thermodynamics. Things go from a state of order to what? To disorder. In other words, things get worse. As your church just goes on, hey, 1 year from now, if you don't do anything, your church will be worse. Why? Because systems don't naturally develop. Chaos naturally develops. If you park your car in your driveway and leave it there for 7 years, it's not going to come back shiny. It's going to come back, probably not running. The gas will be no more good in it. It'll have water in the engine. It'll be covered in pollen. I mean, doesn't get better. And in your church, systems don't naturally develop. You have to create them with focus. But number 2 is this: systems solve problems and save money. Solve problems and save money. And Andy hinted at this. He said, listen, you may not have a youth pastor problem. You may have a system problem. And so, you may think, hey, if I'm changing this person out, then it'll get better. No, it's a systems problem. And you solve the system, you solve the problem. And here's where all the church planners start paying attention. Systems will save you money. We were wasting a lot of money in our church doing a lot of different things because we didn't have good systems. And then number 3, systems often determine your success. Systems often determine your success. Tony Morgan's a friend of mine. He runs a group called the Unstuck Group. Tony is a fantastic church consultant and thinker. If you need a consultant, you won't do better than Tony. And I'm a church consultant, and I'm saying that to you. But here's what Tony said. He said, I think Life Church and North Point will thrive after Craig and Andy are gone because both churches embrace team teaching, develop leaders, and establish healthy systems. There's the word. Many large churches lack all 3. And so what's Tony saying? He's saying healthy systems is a key. If it's a key to the mega church, it's a key to the medium-sized church, and it's a key to the small church. And systems will often determine our success. So how in the world do you create healthy systems in your church? Well, you've only got 2 options. Option number 1 is work hard. And this is the option that we chose back in 2007, 2008 when we needed to create systems. I basically carved out about 6 months on our calendar, and we made a list of every system that we needed in our church. We said, listen, I need a preaching system because I'm going to preach a message every week, and I need to know what the heck to talk about because I'm just making this stuff up and downloading graphics off the internet and preaching on that. Hey, we need a planning system. Hey, we need a leadership development system because we got to get some elders and some leaders. Hey, we need volunteer recruitment system. We need a kids check-in system. We need financial systems because we're counting money and the dollars are getting bigger and we need to figure out we need a budgeting system because I don't know what we're supposed to. We need an outreach system because we need to figure out what things we're going to do because we got way too many options. We need a mission system. Hey, how are we going to get people in small groups? We need a way to on-ramp people in small groups. And then we need to train the leaders. That's a system. And so we literally made a list of all the systems that we needed to create in our church. And we spent about 6 months talking to as many human beings as we could who have been there and say, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? Can you send me this document on this? Tell me what you do here when this happens. And we started writing every single thing down. And we literally created systems. We were portable. We said, here's how we pack the trailer. Here's how we unpack the trailer. Here's where the money goes. Here's the communication calendar. Here's what we email to people. Here's what we will announce and here's what we will not announce. And we created systems in our church. And it was a ton of hard work. And that's what you could do. That's option number 1. The second option, you could work smart. And if I were doing it again, this is the way I would do it. Because I believe in hard work and there's no substitute for it. But I think if you add a little smart to the hard, then it can go a whole lot better. And so I want to encourage you to work smart. And here's what I mean by work smart, is you can learn from somebody and borrow from somebody. And I say borrow, not steal. And there's a difference. Stealing is when you get other people's systems and you try to put them in place. And that will not work for you. I'm just telling you, this is from somebody who does this for a living. I provide these systems for people. If you just take and photocopy and implement, it will not work. But if you borrow and you take and you look at it and you tweak and you adjust and you just change a few things and you use what somebody else is giving you as a diving board and not the end result, then it will work. That's working smart. And so you can work smart. And one of the ways I want to encourage you to work smart is by jumping in a resource that we've created for you called the Year of Healthy Systems. And this is working smart. This is what I believe is working smart. So all those things I just described, all those systems I've just described, we've figured out a lot of that for you. We've collected a lot of that for you. We've put a lot of this together for you in a program that we're calling the Year of Healthy Systems. Now, if you jump in, and you can do that today. If you jump in, here's some things that are going to happen. 3 benefits. First of all, you will have a guide. Now, this is huge. This is huge. This was huge for me. I just came back from a trip, a pastor's trip to Israel. We went to the Holy Land, and it was an awesome trip. If you ever get the opportunity to go, I think you should go. It'll change your preaching. It'll revolutionize your preaching. And I don't say that lightly. It really will. But we had a guide because a lot of times I didn't know what I was looking at. And it looked like a ruin, right? It's like, hey, there's some rocks. But they were able to tell me what was going on. And here's what was happening in the Bible at that time. And here's what was happening in culture at that time. And here's what Jesus meant. And we had a guide and it explained to us. And it made a huge difference. And I look back, and I was like, man, that would not have worked well without that guide. But so many times in church, we try to forge ahead to uncharted territory without a guide. And it's really dumb. It's really a dumb thing. It doesn't work that well. The best athletes, they have coaches. Politicians, athletes, CEOs, people at the top of their game. If you look at it and look underneath the, kind of peel back the layers and look under it, they got coaches, they got guides, they got people helping them. And so one of the benefits to being a part of the Year of Healthy Systems is you're going to have a guide. One of our churches that I've worked with over the last few months or year has been a guy named Stephen Earp, and he's the lead pastor of Elevate Church. And he said this. He said, there's no way to overstate the impact Michael's coaching has had on my ability to coach and develop my staff. His systems have helped me make it so simple. And that's a person who paid me, and I worked with Stephen one-on-one, and he paid me. His church made a big investment into having me come to his church several times and work with Stephen on the phone and on conference calls and in groups and working with him on a lot of this stuff. And he's saying, hey, this stuff really, really, really helped. Here's a tweet that Sean Wood's the pastor of Freedom Church in Moncks Corner, South Carolina. He said, we've had M. Luke Kazuski, that's me on Twitter, speaking into Freedom Church's systems for 2 years, and you need to do this, pastors. And he said the link there at yearofsystems.com. And so I would love to be your coach. I'd love to be your guide. Most of the time, I'm going to tell you what I messed up and screwed up. Some of the time, I'm going to say, here's what worked. Here's where we got this. Here's where we did that. Here's how we answered that question. And so you're not going to be alone. You're going to have a guide. And I'm telling you, a guide makes a huge difference. Number 2, you will get a template. You'll get a template. And so when that system you need to create, I've probably done a lot of that work for you. We have probably done a lot of that work for you. We're going to show you kind of what's working in some other churches. When you say, here's the issue that we're facing in the program, through the coaching, through the resources, through the documents and the downloads, we're going to show you how other churches have addressed and solved the problem. And where we can do it, we're going to give you this flow chart. We're going to give you this spreadsheet. We're going to give you the actual template. And so you won't just get like a metaphorical template. You're going to get an actual template. But then the biggest reason is number 3 is you're going to get it done. We would have never created healthy systems in our church if we didn't say, we're taking this time period, and for us it was 6 months. We're taking this and we are focusing on healthy systems. And one of the reasons I want to encourage you to do this is because you could put it on your calendar and you're going to say, this year, this is our goal. We are going to do this year. And that's a huge benefit. When you get to the end of the year, you're going to look back on it and you're going to say, finally, we've got some systems in our church. So what do you get when you join? Well, number 1, monthly training on real topics. And so we're going to talk about the real stuff. And we're going to talk about the stuff I didn't really learn how to do in seminary when I went to seminary. And we're going to dive in, and I'm going to do coaching, and it's going to be live coaching. You're going to be able to ask your questions, real questions. You'll be able to get the recordings of the coaching to share it with your staff and share it with your team. And we're going to talk about some real stuff. Let me give you examples of some of the training topics. We're going to talk about a system for connecting new people to your church. We're going to talk about moving people into groups or classes because that's a system that you need. We're going to talk about recruiting volunteers. How do you get new volunteers to serve in your church? We're going to talk about personal organization and leadership. People sometimes will say, how do you get all that stuff done? I am not a very smart person, but I figured out a few things that I think will help you huge. And that's a system, a personal leadership system. Stewardship and generosity. We're going to talk about some of those financial systems so that the money is smoother in your church and not chaotic. Developing and leading a staff. I talked a little bit about this, but we're going to dive deeper into how you can develop and lead a staff. Turning volunteers into leaders. That is a system. You have volunteers right now who are actually leaders, and the reason they're not good volunteers is because they're really leaders and you don't know it. And then you have leaders who are being volunteers and they're frustrated because you're not giving them the ability to lead. You're just asking them to be a volunteer. Huge difference between the two, and we're going to talk about a system there. How about a system for reaching new people? And this is where we talk about growth. I mean, there are some massive money wasters out there that people talk about. I mean, a lot of people talk about, and they just don't work. And I'm amazed that people spend that much money and it doesn't work. And so we're going to talk about a system for reaching new people. Planning church services, that's a system. One of the best ways to have your church grow is to have better church services. And so we'll talk about that. Creating a ministry calendar. Those are just 10 of the topics. There's some other ones we're going to talk about. And all those are going to be live. You're going to be able to ask your questions, but they're also recorded and archived for you in our private members area. So you can go download it, watch it again, send it to a team member, send it to a volunteer, send it to a different staff member that's handling that area. And it'll be really helpful for you. The second thing that you're going to get is you're going to get insanely practical resources. So when we talk about, following up with guests, we're going to give you the flow chart so you can open it up and customize it. When we talk about job description, I'm going to give you the job description in a Word document so you can tweak it. And so I'm going to give you documents, spreadsheets, flow charts, forms, all the systems, all the strategies that go along with the topic for the month. I'm going to give that to you, and that's going to be your template. The third thing is we've got a community forum. We put a community forum together for you so you can come and you can ask questions. A big part of this is going to be sharing your work. Hey, how'd you answer this question? Proverbs says iron sharpens iron, right? Friends make friends better. Iron sharpens iron. So we're going to make each other better. It's not just going to be learning from us at Church Fuel. We're going to learn from you. We're going to learn from each other. Here's what's working. Here's how we handled that. Here's how we adapted this system. Here's what our small group onboarding process looks like. Here's the document we used. And so you're going to learn a ton from each other in this forum. And that's a huge, huge aspect to the program. Now, I know you're asking this question. How much does it cost? How much does it cost? So let me show you a couple things that I actually do. This is Dave Ramsey has a membership program called Entree Leadership. Entree Leadership. He's got it's called All Access, and you can join this. And he's got some monthly resources. And listen, this is a fantastic program. This is a really good program. In fact, if you can, you should join it. It's really good. It costs $299 a month. And again, it is worth every penny. Here's another thing. This is a guy named Ramit Sethi, and Ramit Sethi, as I'm recording this right now, he's got a 5 or 6 week course on how to launch a business online. And listen, I purchased this. It is really, really good. It is worth every penny, but it costs $2,000 to buy this online program. It is very expensive, but it is very good. And I'm showing you these 2 slides to say, listen, if stuff works, if stuff is good, it is an investment, not an expense. Now, if it's no good, it is a waste of money, not an expense. But if it's good, it is worth it. But I'm really, really excited because we try to make the Year of Healthy Systems really affordable for you, that it's just $599. That's for all 12 topics. That's for all 12 modules. That's for all the resources. That's for all the programs. That's for all the interaction. That's for all the help. That's for all the coaching, all the videos. Access, you can download these things, share them with your team. If you have 50 campuses, this stuff can help all 50 campuses, everybody in your organization. If $599 is too expensive for you, we created a 3 monthly payment option, $249. So $249 times 3 months, you can still get all the same stuff, but that may make it a little more affordable. Hey, if that's too expensive for you, then we have a ton of free stuff on our website. That's the deal. But this, I believe, it is worth every penny because of all the benefits that we talked about. Greg Kell is a pastor of Cornerstone Baptist Church. He said, the obstacle hindering many churches from growing is not a lack of finances, people, or programs. It's outdated or inefficient systems. Michael has spent several months coaching us in systems so we can be better stewards and make a bigger impact. And Greg was another one of those pastors who their church invested in healthy systems, in strategies, in leadership. And they're seeing some really, really, really cool things happen in their church. So I want to encourage you to jump in. You can jump in at yearofsystems.com. Just type that into your browser. It'll take you to the page where you can order. The cool thing is listen, if you go through a whole year of this, we're not trying to just take your money and give you just stupid stuff on the internet. If you go through a year of this and you go, that didn't work, that didn't help, that wasn't what I thought it was. Or, hey, I'll be straight up honest with you. If you get to the end of the year and you go, hey, we had a bad offering, I just want our money back. We have a 1-year money back guarantee. And that's not a bozo marketing thing. We want you to be able to do this and feel good about it. And so do it implement it. If you go through an entire year and it doesn't work, and you say we didn't work, we didn't have time to do it, I quit my job and got a different job at a different church, whatever the reason is, we will give you a refund because we believe in this. We believe this will help your church. And so I want to encourage you to be a part of the year of healthy systems, and I want to encourage you to help your church grow. It'll help your church grow and be healthy. Hey, if we can serve you in any way, please just let us know. You can reach out to us on Twitter. You can reach out to us on our website. You can call us. You can email us. Whatever works for you. But we want you to know that we're here for you to give you insanely practical resources to help move your church forward. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And God bless.